guys, it's Kate, and I hope you're having a great day today. I've got a whole bunch of acrylic paint that I grabbed from my stash, and I am going to do a desert landscape that's kind of an abstract version, a lot of creative license, but I will paste the photo reference below and also put it in the corner of my screen. I may or may not use these colors. I don't think I'll grab any more, but this is what I've got on my table today. I have sap green, I have flesh tint, which is a nice peachy color, yellow ochre, violet gray, lamp black, scarlet lake, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, lemon yellow, and of course titanium white. I've got my art journal out, my palette here, and I am going to just have some fun getting some paint on paper today. So this is my art journal. It is actually Master's Touch. I use it for pretty much all of my art journal YouTube videos, and it's kind of funny because I've been working on this for about 1.5 years, and only YouTube paintings go in here, and I am getting to the end of my book, so I'll be able to do a full book flip through soon if you're interested in that video. But I've got my paper taped. This is I think it's like an 8x10 or somewhere thereabouts, and my palette here, I've got some white on it already, and I am gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna be working with a nice cheap brush here. This is like my flat brush. I've got my favorite angle brush. I've got my favorite filbert that I've had for 1,000,000 years. And I've got this nice little bristle brush that's a pretty narrow one. It's a #1 round Simply Simmons. I don't even remember where I got this, but it's a nice kind of scraggly brush. I may also grab another synthetic small round if I want to do any finer lines. I'll probably just grab it now. This one, it's also well loved. It's kind of fluffy, but it will come to a point once it gets wet. So I'm going to set that aside and let's get started with our painting. So first I'm going to do a bit of an underpainting here. Now, if you look at the reference photo, a lot of it is really kind of that desert sand color, and then we've got a pretty blue sky. I am going to do my underpainting here with burnt sienna, which I think is going to add a nice, dark, warm, neutral background. And I think it'll look really nice with some of that paint layered over top. I'm also going to grab a little bit of this yellow ochre and kind of do a bit of a blend just to add a little bit more yellow to that reddish brown of this sienna. So I'm going to grab my bigger brush, and I'm going to get a little bit of extra water on it just to help me blend these colors together a bit better. And then I am going to get to work putting a layer on the background. So I'm going to add a little bit more water here. So it's a little bit more of a glaze. I don't want to get a super thick layer of paint on my paper. I'd like to still be able to see some brush strokes and texture, and be able to see my paper coming in from the background. So I'm just going to be very loose with this and make sure to get my whole paper covered. I'm trying to find that sort of sweet spot balance between adding enough water to thin it out into more of a glaze and not adding so much water that it really just soaks into my paper and takes forever to dry. So just kind of find whatever works for you, and then just run with it. And you can always use a hair dryer, heat gun, or anything else you have on hand to dry your page. This is not going to be going for realism. I want to just have some fun going along using a photo as a reference, but not trying to copy it exactly. My biggest thing is, we see things all around us that might inspire us, and I really wanted to do something that was, going to be for a nice desert sort of look. And I think this is a great photo to work with because there's a lot of color, there's a lot of depth, and I find it really inspiring. So I want to do something to make it my own. And if you're looking for inspiration, using real life is an awesome thing to do, and you don't have to try to copy it. You don't have to be a great artist and paint realistically to be able to enjoy using a photo reference. You can make it your own, and taking that creative license is what's going to make your work really unique. So I'm just going to let this dry for a few minutes and then I'll be right back. Okay, we are all dry on our paper. So the next thing I want to do is map out our shapes. So I'm also going to use the burnt sienna for that and my nice little scraggly brush, but any small sketchy brush will do, any round, even an angle brush, whatever you've got that's small. And I'm just going to loosely put in our shapes here so that we can have our layout done, and then we can really focus on our color and value, whatever we end up choosing to do. So I have our sky area, we've got the sort of shadowy canyon side over in this area. We've got a nice canyon highlighted here and a bit of a hump over here. Then we have a big layer of green kind of coming through the center, and this is all of our plants. And then we've got our foreground, which is sort of that flat desert area. And in the photo, it kind of looks like around where that big tree branch is, it kind of drops off over a hill, and then you see a bunch of shadows again. Now the sun, I think, is coming from here because it's hitting the front of that back mountain, but now we're sort of deep in the canyon, so we're still in the shadows up here, even though the sun is kind of coming, I think, from behind the camera. So I'm going to loosely put in our shapes just to get our layout done. Now, of course, my paper is not the exact same proportions as the painting, but we're going to do an approximation and kind of divide up this area so that we can just have a good starting point to work with. So I'm going to start actually at the bottom, and I'm going to start where I think the top of that hill is. So in the photo reference, it's maybe 15 or 20% up the page. So I'm going to start right about here. And don't forget you have your tape edges, so it's not really going all the way down to here. This is the bottom of my paper here. So I'm just going to start and loosely kind of paint in where I think that hill goes. Now it kind of raises up where that branch goes, and this is going to sort of be the line for my branch also. I'm going to grab a little bit more paint. Now we have those big bushes that are here, I'd say just below the halfway point. So I will start doing my sketch here for that bush. And it comes right about here, kind of goes up, comes across the paper, just like this. And then it kind of comes down a little bit where you have some other kind of greenery or brush that's kind of there in the distance. Then we've got that hump, which is part mountain, part tree, that kind of comes up this way. All right. And then just a little ways from the top, we've got this really strong canyon wall that kind of comes down, raises up, and then falls down again and kind of comes over and meets this. Now I'm just going to finish putting this in here because this is, I think, in the front, and you've got kind of a bright spot here that the sun is hitting. And then we have our top canyon. So it comes right around here and angles up a little bit and then angles back. Now my sky is going to be a little bit smaller here than it is in the original painting, but I really like where the sun hits and where everything kind of comes together right here. And then you have that really nice foreground feature with the tree branches. So I am going to make sure to get that in there too. And then a nice swath of green just kind of coming across the center. So this is just our basic shape for the painting. And it's going to just make sure that we're not going willy-nilly everywhere, that it's still going to be a definitely recognizable landscape. We've got our proportions pretty much on point. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. You can take creative license. And if you want to remove any of the elements, you certainly can. And you can add stuff. If you want to add some flowers in the front, go for it. So I'm going to go with this. And what's nice about using the burnt sienna is I've already got a base for a lot of that. It's just going to be really working on my shadows and highlights. And I think I'm going to play around a little bit with that, especially with this peach color. I think that's going to work really nicely for some highlights, especially on this sort of flat land area that we've got going on up here. So I'm going to grab another one of my flat brushes. This is a little bit smaller. This is, I think it's a 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch. This is a 1 inch. This is a 3/4. The print has long since worn off the brush. I've had these for a long time, and it was one of my first paintbrush sets I ever got. I think I picked up like a $5 pack at Walmart that has like 20 brushes in it, and they are, you know, your cheap brushes, but they work, and I enjoy using them, and they've lasted me for years and years. And they don't shed, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so I am going to start, I think, with some darks. And now this is going to have, you know what, just for my own reference, I am going to add my little tree line here. So this is going to be our plants. So we have another shape that's getting added in here. So this is going to be our tree. This is going to be our shrubs and greenery and all that stuff. So it's going to come right through here, maybe even a little bit bigger. Okay. So I'm going to grab my smaller brush first. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre with the corner and some of this burnt sienna. Maybe just a little bit of white, just to get it nice and rich. And I might add just a little bit of red to this too. Yeah, I like that. Okay, now I'm going to start putting in my shadowy areas. Now this is going to be, whoops, you know what? Let me add a little bit of this sap green in there also. It's going to desaturate this a little bit, and it'll be a little bit of a better shadow. So I'm just going to really work this into my brush and start coming in here with some shadows. My mountain area has those sort of lines in it that kind of go around where the angle is going in the painting, in the picture. So I'm just going to kind of keep that look going. I'm going to add some more of that burnt sienna, a little more yellow, and a little bit of white, and lighten this up a bit because we don't have only dark areas on here. We've got some brighter portions too. And I want to just vary this, and I'm just putting in sort of a base layer. And I can grab some of this burnt sienna and just kind of have fun with adding some different colors. I'm going to grab my smaller scraggly brush, start adding in some more. I'm going to put some nice red in here and brighten it up a bit and really get that sort of red desert look in here. Okay. Now this is my shrubbery, so I'm going to keep on coming down, and I'm just going to be grabbing some color from here. and varying it a bit. And you can see it does not have a lot of detail at all. Now I'm going to add some more green. Now burnt sienna has kind of a reddish hue, plus I have a lot of red in here. So adding green, which is a complementary color, is going to give us those sort of deep neutral shadows. And so I'm going to add a bit of this to my painting. We've got a definite shadow by that ridge. We've got kind of this round thing there. I want to make sure we get that because I really like the look of that. I'm going to add a little bit more white here. If your paintbrush gets too much paint on it where you're having trouble blending, just wipe it off or give it a rinse. Other than that, I'm really not doing anything with my brush. I'm just keeping on mixing because all of these colors are really kind of blending together anyway. So I'm going to do a few little vertical lines, and I might add just a little bit of blue to this. This is the ultramarine blue, and that kind of deepens the color a little bit more also. Adds a little bit more shadow. Okay, I'm going to work on this background mountain next. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre, plenty of white, and I'm going to do a layer of this first, and then we can start adding some other colors. So we've got kind of a shadowy area there. I'm going to grab some of this burnt sienna, mix a bit of a darker, and then we can get that shadow. We've got some dark areas right here, but for the most part, this is going to be a pretty light color. I'm going to add some more yellow ochre, just a little bit of that burnt sienna. And we're going to have some of that detail right here. And add some more white and maybe just, a hint of that green. And that'll just make it a little bit more neutral. Now we've got a little bit of white kind of coming around this edge here. And then we've got a few smaller shadows there. Now we have this little mountain here. I'm going to go back into that yellow ochre, some of that burnt sienna, and a little bit more white, and start filling this in. Now we have our shrub that's going to be here, but you can still see it kind of coming through. So I am just going to add that color here because then we can add the green over it when we put in our shrub, but I left a little bit of that outline there, so that'll be fine. And this is kind of a simple little shape. It doesn't have a lot of detail. So I'm just going to kind of leave it like that, but I am going to lighten this up right here in the front a bit because we have the sun really hitting this edge and it almost looks like another hill, but I love that hard sort of shadow. I'm just giving my brush a little bit of a rinse and blot, and I'm just going to blend this together a bit. Another thing I want to do is really lighten this back up again. You can see that shadow kind of coming there. This almost blends together, and so I want to make sure that that highlight is good. Yeah, and we have a really nice bit of contrast there. We can always add more, but I think that will be good for right now. So let's look at this foreground area. So this down here is really kind of shadowy, and I'm going to actually grab my filbert brush that I like, and this will help me cover a little bit more ground on my paper. So this is like a really nice sort of peachy color, peachy red, and I really want to bump that up. So I'm going to kind of grab some of this over here, and I'm going to add some of this burnt sienna to it, and also plenty of white, because this is really a highlight color. And I'm going to even mix a little bit of a second sort of pile over here of paint, and this is kind of a nice pink color. I'm going to add a little bit more of the burnt sienna to that, maybe a little bit of yellow ochre, and warm it up a bit, because it is definitely warm. And I am going to start putting this in. Now I'm just going to be sort of loose with my brush, putting in the shapes. This is going to go around our plant area, okay? And then I'm going to come up to the edge of where I've got this little hill. This is going to be a little bit more shadowy. We've got a little bit of this color down here. And then here it's going to be the brightest. So I'm going to add a little bit more white, maybe even just pump it up with a little bit of red, and then add some of this color here. Now I'm going to come in with some more of that burnt sienna and mix it in with that pink and red, and I am going to have a bit of a darker shadowy area down here. Add a little bit more. And see, I am not being any way specific with my brush placement. I am really just doing blobs. But what I am also doing is working on this color. So again, I'm grabbing that green and mixing it with my pink color, and that deepens it up, turns it into a neutral, and now I'm looking at these sort of shadowy areas here. I'm going to add a little bit more, and make this nice and deep, because this is going to be a dark spot. I'm even adding some of this ultramarine here, and just really getting that dark color. Embrace your brush strokes. Just get in your general shapes. We've got kind of a sort of craggy, shadowy shape here. We've got some shadows that are kind of coming out from the greenery area over here. And we can just keep working with it, adding different colors. Maybe even add some yellow to some spots. I want it to be a lot of nice texture, but we have kind of this dark, shadowy area around all of our plants. It's darkest over here though, so I want to definitely get those dark values, and then this kind of lightens up just a little bit. I'm even going to add a little bit of yellow here, just to tone down that pink a bit. And then come back in with some of that burnt sienna. And give my brush a little rinse and bring some more of that nice warm color here to the front. Now we've got another really nice dark shadowy spot right under this tree branch. I'll even make this a little bit darker. And then it kind of comes right through here. And you can see we're just sort of working on those values. Now this is all a lot of reds and browns, but you can see we have so much variety here through the page. And I'm just going to keep on working on that, and maybe add some really dark color there, some dark here, and just really look at adding some texture. I'm just doing a little bit of dry brushing, adding some structure here. We have some of these sort of lines coming down the hill. We've got this craggy shape here. Don't really know what that is. We've got that branch that kind of comes up this way. I'm going to add some shadow here that will go behind it. And then we've got just kind of smooth this out a bit. Add a little bit of dry brush texture. And I might even come up here and give this a little bit of structure too. Let me go into this yellow just a little bit more and come up there. And I want to brighten this up a bit too. Now that it's dried, I want to make sure I get enough of those highlights up there. But this area right here is the brightest, and I'm going to make that even lighter, and then even have some of this and really embrace that brightness. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to add just a little bit of red here and add some pops of pink, because that just feels right to me. So you've got a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a highlight, but not so much of a shadow. And then we can add some more golden color. Scampy says hello. All right, I am going to give this a few minutes to dry and I will be back. All right, we are all dry. I'm back. And I grabbed, whoops, not that one. I grabbed some phthalo blue, and this is the color that I really want to use for my sky. It's much it's much brighter and more sky-like than the ultramarine, at least in this picture. So I am going to grab my flat brush again. I'm going to grab some white, plenty of it. I have a little bit of burnt sienna in there too. And then I'm going to take the corner of my brush and just take a little bit. It's a really strong color, so I want to make sure that I'm not going to overdo it and make it too dark. I want to have a nice light blue that's going to be good for the sky, and this will deepen up pretty quickly. So I'm just going to take little by little until I get the shade that I want, which I think this might be pretty good, maybe one more dip. And I think I'm going to start with this. So I'm going to start cutting in my sky. And I'm going to go around this little mountain top. And I'm not going to worry too much about getting an exactly even edge. I want to kind of make it flow a little bit with the top of that mountain. And then I'm going to come back in and do color. I'm going to do the same thing down here. And I'm just going to go right alongside this mountain here. And then I'm going to kind of clean up this edge a little bit too. I want to make sure that I don't have just hard straight lines. That way our hills and everything kind of come out from that background. Now I'm just going to kind of go over this and add some nice little brush strokes here. And grab some more of this blue and just finish off this edge. Just like that. Now I'm going to grab some more white. I'm not going to mix it too much. And I'm going to start adding in some of these cloud shapes. Again, not trying to be exact, although I am kind of switching up the direction of my brush a bit. I'm going from the side to the edge to the corner. And as long as I have sort of my basic cloud shapes here. I'm pretty happy. Make sure to add some more white. So we have some nice brights in here. I'm not going to mix it with any of the blue, just like that. And I think that really starts bringing things together. All right, so I've got this sort of pile of paint here. I'm going to leave this blue and I'm going to add some sap green to this. Now I am wanting to get kind of a muted blue. So I'm going to dip just the corner of my brush into that red, and that's going to start toning this down a bit. I still want it to be a fairly dark color, and I'm using ultramarine here as well, and I kind of like this shade actually. So I'm going to grab my little palette knife because I have a bunch of paint on my brush here, but I'm actually going to use a smaller brush to get paint down. So I don't want this to go to waste. So I am going to grab that, and I've even got some on my little palette knife here, and this might be fun to paint with. So let's see how this works. I'm going to kind of come up into my mountain, and I'm going to add some more color as well, but I'm just going to start blocking in a little bit of these shapes here. And I want to make sure that I've got plenty of color, and I really like the sort of scattered effect you get with this palette knife because it's very hard to control, and it kind of helps do some of that work for you for your foliage. So I'm just going to keep grabbing it and go over some of what we had already and just clean off this palette knife. All right, so now I'm going to grab my smaller round again. I'm going to grab more green, more of this sap green. I want to start going to my darkest. So I grabbed a little bit of red. That's going to tone that down. I'm even going to grab a little bit of this ultramarine blue and just start working on a nice dark value here. Now I'm going to get some of this excess paint off my brush. So you can see where I'm just kind of dabbing my brush, and that's about the coverage that I kind of want. Now this is my bristle brush, so I'll be able to get a lot of good color going on here by just kind of mashing it in. And I don't want to cover everything, and we can get deeper in some spots. You can kind of look at your photo for your reference and then add some shadowy areas here. We kind of have this kind of coming around this way, and then we definitely have a lot of deep shadows over here. It kind of comes up into this lighter color, and I'm kind of letting that blend together. Where this bush is right here, you've got some shadow coming around here. So I'm going to get that in there and just start building up my layers. And since I'm working on paint that's already wet, it's kind of blending itself right on my paper. And this is what's going to really put a lot of life into it. We've got some shadowy greens here. And you can change the direction of your brush. And you can see way in the background, there's just a few little bushy shapes kind of coming down the slope, and that really kind of helps with the depth of the painting too. So I'm just going to add some of that shadow there, and I'm just following along. I'm going to vary this color a little bit, maybe add a little bit more blue, a little bit more of this ultramarine, I think, kind of gray it out just a little bit. And I'm just blotting my brush. I'm not trying to do anything detailed. I'm just kind of looking at this painting and finding the darker shadowy areas. And where we get up on these hills, I'm just going to make much smaller marks. All right. I haven't really grabbed any of this lemon yellow. Let's throw some of that in there. Make almost like an olive green color. You can see that. Still sort of desaturated, but it's getting a little more saturated. And this adds kind of a nice green. I can go back and forth between darks and lights. That's a little bit too green. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre to mix in here. Maybe a little bit of white. And now we can start getting in some of these almost highlights, sort of the high levels of our greenery. I'm going to go back into this sort of medium green, maybe even add a little bit more of that yellow, maybe a little yellow ochre, a little bit of white. Start coming in here for a little bit more saturated green. I'm going to give my brush a little rinse. Now I'm going to start adding in some of these other colors. We've got some really nice peach going on there. I'm going to take some of that flesh tint. I'm going to add a little bit of this grayish purple color, and I think that is a pretty good match. I'm going to add a little bit of white to brighten it up and see how this looks. Maybe even a little bit of red. It's too much red. Let's see. Let's desaturate this a little bit more. That looks pretty good. Let's lighten it a little bit. All right, now we can start adding in some of these strokes. And you can see kind of back here, we've got a bit of a blue color. I'm going to grab some of that phthalo blue. A little bit more of this, kind of make almost like a blue lavender color. And I'm going to come in back here and get some of that in. This is where you can really have fun with those colors. Now I'm going to kind of get some excess off my brush here. I'm going to go into this white and mix it with some of the leftover on my brush. I'm going to add another layer of lightness in here, just like that. And then maybe a little bit of a pink. Now I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to kind of gray this up even more. Just kind of put all my colors together. And we've got a lot of gray over here. It looks like it could be brush, could be anything. I'm going to turn it into some more flowers. So I'm going to go dipping into this color some more so we can get that also on the page. Brighten it up a bit and put in a little bit of darkness too, just like that. All right, now I'm grabbing my other round brush that has a smoother tip, and I'm going to see what I kind of get here. I'm going to go for kind of a gray color. This might be a little too much green gray, so I'm going to add some more of that purple. Purple and yellow are complementary colors, and it makes these nice neutrals. And I kind of like the look of this gray. So this is what I am going to use to make those tree branches. So I'm just going to mix it up. I'm adding a little bit of water, and that will just help me spread it a little bit better. And then for the highlights on those branches, I am going to add a little bit of white to some of this and make it a highlight. So I'm not trying to get exact, but just follow a general line. So I've got this, and I'm just going to kind of bring this up, and we're just getting some of these basic shapes in right now. Now I think I want to go a little bit darker on this if I can. Maybe I'll throw in a little bit of green here, a little bit of this blue, a little bit of red. I'll just put everything together and make a really dark color. All right. This one kind of comes right over here by that craggy thing. We're just going to make some lines that come out. And it's all kind of pointing up toward that focal area in the back. All right, let's make another one. This one kind of comes and follows along here. We've got a big part of the branch, and it just kind of goes everywhere. We got one that kind of comes around here and trails off. We've got another one that comes out here. And then we have some other branches that are just kind of coming any which way. That looks pretty good to me. I don't want it to be too complicated. I just want you to be able to see those branches and definitely be able to tell what they are. So I've got my main structure here, and I think I like how that looks. I'm just going to put a few little wispy things coming up off of here. And this brush is a little bit too big for that. Let me go with my little scraggly one. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And if we need to do anything in any of these spots, like add more color, we can. But I'm pretty happy with this. So now I'm going to grab some of this white and just mix it in a little corner over here. And so we have that nice light gray. And I'm just gonna go over some of these to add that little bit of highlight. And I'm just following sort of the tops of my branches. Now the highlights back here are not quite as light, so I'm going to darken those a bit. I'm going to mix less white in, but you'll still have a little bit of a highlight there. This looks great, I think. I really love this. All right, I'm going to get that sort of circular shape or crescent shape branch on the ground. Maybe a couple of little pieces here. All right, now we can go back and add some of these greens to the bottom. So I've rinsed my brush. I'm going to get into some of this medium green, medium to dark. I'm going to add some down here. Switch up your brush angles a bit. I'm going to get some darker. And we've got some lighter green coming right off of those branches. Not too much. This is a dying tree that just kind of fell over. Just want to make sure that we're getting our different values. And this is going to be much lighter toward the top than toward the bottom. But we're still kind of in the shadows. Let's get a little bit of this yellow ochre in here, warm it up. And I think we have a really awesome painting here. I'm going to get my tape off so we can see it with the border, and I'll give you the close-up. And this is one of the longer ones that we've done together, but it was so much fun to do. I really enjoy playing with these landscapes and just kind of having fun with them. And it's like, I don't know, you feel a little bit like it just kind of comes together at the end. And this is really what I love to see. And I just kind of went into it with a photo. It does not have to be a complicated process. Just keep going. And when you start to add in those little details past your ugly stage and you get that mixture of values, it ends up being a really cool painting. So I'm going to lift this up and let you see the close-up. This is a really good interpretation of that photo, I think, and I had so much fun doing it. and you can just see everything there. So I really hope you enjoyed this video today and followed along with me with your acrylic paints or whatever you've got on hand. You can use gouache or anything like that that has some opacity. You could do it with watercolor too, but the technique's going to be a lot different. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you give it a try for yourself, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, keep creating.